Hello everyone, Kurt over here, and welcome back to another episode from Hope Federal Labs. Today we're going to be talking about different types of strikes of the dagger, once again, but with a little bit of a twist. And today we're looking at not just knife end shots, but also things that we might see elsewhere that maybe empower us to take different kinds of actions against somebody. Again, these are just continuations of what you see within the same mechanisms of flow when it comes down to Dagger, their attacks and whatnot, as well as also some kind of reflections and thoughts I have in regards to how what is true for the sword is true for the dagger in regards to utilizing it in different kind of context-wise. It broadens up the notion of what may be happening in these kind of periods, whether in or out of armor. So with that being the case here, let's roll the tape. So last time we were on here, we were talking about how the rotation, that volta stabile of the feet, and what that may be causing us to be able to do with a rondel dagger. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit more in regards to, so I have this knife out, and now I'm in a spot where the shot that I was going to go for is no longer open to me. What do I do? I have very limited evidence that even suggests that this might be a thing. But because of the creativity that I believe that Fiore's manuscript does for us, I believe that you are starting to see things out there where what happens when you get into entanglement? Well, and the blade is no longer of use. You use the pommel. To reinforce that, when we get to some of the sword manual stuff that's out there, you have to understand that there's a point where once the sword gets into place, it's better to use the pommel. If I come across right here, it's better to start using the point to get onto a target. The cutting mechanism of this tool it's powerful, of course, but it's not the only thing. And that right there got me thinking about some concepts when it comes down to dagger. And we're going to talk about that today. So, what happens when I've got into a clinch with somebody, and we're going like this right here, it escalates and so on and so forth, and during his time, I decide I have to pull my dagger out. So in this case right here, I'm coming back this way, and they're already putting their arm up into this position. They're already putting their arm up into a space which is trying to clog up any of this notion up here, and it's entangled. One of the things, and I've tried this during just like very limited dagger sparring, you have to be very careful with it because it's kind of a shock. It goes back to the concept of Fiore's abrazare concepts of where you strike and knee people. So what happens when ultimately this space up here is all gone? One of the things I think that's happening here is because what is true for the sword is true for the dagger. And if I'm up here grabbing and I'm trying to, and this is no longer the option, then the next option is to come low and utilize this metallic piece against the soft part of somebody's groin. Now, mind you, I don't believe that this is probably something that would be effective in armor. I don't even know if it's necessarily something that's written in any other type of manuscript out there. What I do know is having done this to people in training and having had it done to me, and that's with a padded dagger, is incredibly effective. And that's not with a metal or a ridge right here. Some of these things have jagged edges on this. We're talking about now the blade edge is useless. I'm trying to get this thing up in place. And I can't go so tiny line right here. If I go right here and try to come over, well, that's just turning me over. That's a really dangerous position when you start talking about utilizing this combat tool. On the other edge, I'm here working on this. It's up here in place. So I'm working on that whole area. I can't get inside of this. So instead, I'm working across, and instead of trying to force the point, going low, and then coming back up. And again, if we're talking about what happens to the body potentially, we're talking about grapple, strike the groin, strike maybe the hands right here, popping up and striking the elbow. popping back with this and coming right back in. Okay? And that's not using the dagger, the blade of the dagger. That's utilizing one of the rondelles of the dagger. So depending on what you're trying to do, if I'm, and obviously this works really well from the Mandrito side. If I'm on the Revezzo side, I'm going right here. Well, ultimately I have dagger here, dagger point here. And I have to get this thing across where I can go back into utilizing the point or the rondelle side again. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily off of the Revezzo side. I'm saying that when you get into a clinch, the first instinct here is to pull the dagger up. With this tool being in place, I can still strike with this, and I'm talking about striking with the pommel. I'm talking about the disc of the rondelle. Into that point, you can see that lines very nicely right outside of my knuckle. I can also utilize this here to pop upwards into someone's arm, and I can also utilize this here to get back into the shot, okay? Again, knowing effective strikes is a big part of Fiore's Abrazari, and I do not believe that Fiore's Abrazari is just limited to wrestling. Abrazari is it's the handwork, it's the embrace, it's the notion of what happens when these things fail us in a context of deployment and activating. The other mechanism I'm going to talk about here is off of the Sultani line. So again, like we said last week, I'm here, I turn backwards, I draw, that's my shot. But again, if you have ever done any type of sparring with a dagger or playing around, like, with some of the techniques when it happens within classes and whatnot, then you may have observed what happens is people's tendency, as soon as you grab onto them and they see this thing come out, or it's here, the first thing that people will do typically is they grab and they start doing this. Makes a lot of sense. And that's more Fifth Master Dagger type stuff here. We're going to talk about that way later on. So what happens here? Well, ultimately, when we look at this kind of, he's grabbed onto me, I see that knife coming up, I'm immediately trying to stop here in some form or fashion. Or maybe I see the knife come up, I'm coming straight up with my hands, I'm going like this. I'm putting something out there. I'm utilizing that posta longa, maybe frontale, to put a wall between me and the person. Okay? I don't want this thing to hit me, of course, so therefore I have to do something in order to protect myself. And what I see that's happening right here is essentially you're trying to shut down lines of where, like I said before, this is very strong, this is the most powerful point, and anywhere before that, you can kind of stop that and work in different directions. It takes a lot of effort to do that. When we start talking about, for today, we're talking about, so I'm here in this, I've come low, and so I've grabbed on, and that person is instead of just standing there like this, which is not necessarily what's happening, they're going like this immediately. They see the knife is out, and they're doing everything they can to put their hand out in front to try to stop that. Okay. In doing this, I'm here. Again, the same thing we can utilize is the disc. So coming this way right here, I can't find it. Boom. Going into that posta frontale with a strike, boom, and then right back into work. So I pull, boom, and it's right back. And again, depending on what your target is, if you're talking about in the medieval era, remember we're talking about the medieval era, if the person is wearing a lot of armor, this may or may not actually do anything. One thing that people kind of take for granted is visors weren't always worn. So going here and striking inside of someone's visor with this disc is enough to shift a lot of weight. Again, I am not proposing that this works for every situation. It is just the creativity of mind that I think that Fiore is trying to exemplify with his work. So I'm here. I'm in Porta di Ferro singled. I've grabbed. I go into frontale and I go right back into the low work. Frontale, up. Right? And all that's doing is allowing me to get them. They're thinking about this. I bring this up, maybe give them a crack, maybe it doesn't work, whatever, it doesn't matter. And that you're utilizing your fendente or mezzane line. So here, 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 boom, boom. And just ways to use this dagger in more than just poke, poke, poke. So if we're talking once again, this is about mix matching sottani and fendente or mezzane lines, other than just the dagger strike. In position, pull the knife, I'm up, I come into this right here, I can't get the dagger fendente down, so I go sottani and then I go fendente. Or I go sottani and then I go mezzane. Those types of options. And then finally, last but not least, we're here, we're in this, knife pops out, they see this right here, I feel their hands try to stop me once, I go into, instead of going back into sottani, utilizing the fendente, and then right back in to that knife and quarter. So those right there, again, are just some observations that I believe are possible within the context of Fiore, and how, again, when you have one edge, but you have a disc position right here, what kind of things are you seeing? And how do we kind of explore and extrapolate that further? So that's going to conclude the video here. Again, thank you so much for tuning in with this. I want to really, once again, emphasize a few things about this. I'm demonstrating with a sharp tool of combat, of war, would have been very effective, I believe, in Fiore's time. I am not suggesting people try this with friends. I am trying to convey the message that this is a very serious combat implementing tool. And whether you are having it in the form of a padded dagger, a wooden rondelle, or this, it conveys a very serious message when it comes down to the practice of arms for 14th century, 15th century kind of combat. I'm not suggesting that people go out there and try this right here. I'm trying to, once again, get into the mind of Fiore and of the time. That's a very important piece here I want people to understand. Again, this right here is just something that I was struck with. Well, I struck first with it, but then I was struck with afterwards in training, where I was trying to work the knife against somebody and I couldn't get it into place. I couldn't get the knife into place. I couldn't do the attack. I couldn't make the things happen here. And then it just struck me, why not just hit them, pull their attention somewhere else, hit them, and then go back into work? I don't know. And like I said, that's the kind of thing right there that kind of goes to this. Now, once again, when I talk about this tool and some of these strikes we've used in the rondelle, I am not proposing that this works for armor. I'm not proposing that it works for, for unarmored. It's just an observation of how we may be only looking at the sharp, sharp, sharp end of the dagger. And when you have discs right here, this is really nasty. I had somebody, not with this, but with a plastic train, one of the cold steel plastic ones. I sat there and they held up my hands and they dug the rondelle into my leather glove that I was wearing. Very uncomfortable, and that's plastic. And when that was happening and they were just messing up my hand, like Fiore tells us to do in some of the manuals, I had to let go. It just sucked. That's metal now, and you're talking about working this against somebody's soft hands. If it's gauntleted, that's a totally different game. But the point right here is, again, it's not people walking around. This isn't Skyrim where everyone's wearing their armor all the time right here, and it's exhausting to do that. So maybe the person's not wearing everything. Maybe the person's just wearing a coat hardy. Who knows what they are wearing? The situation dictates, and that's the kind of thing that we're kind of extrapolating out here. So again, please understand that I am not proposing that this was the answer. It's just one of the things that kind of came to my mind in sparring, and I felt it is something that is also very important to note, because in many ways it goes right back into Abrazari, where I don't have this. Well, now I'm utilizing in different directions. A comment to people out there that might be saying, yeah, well, if I do this right here, well, the hand, you're going to be able to stop the hand. I absolutely understand what you're getting at. However, one thing I teach my students is that in very serious kind of training scenarios that are replicating combat scenarios, heightened stress makes people do desperate things. And we have to be aware that these lines that we keep talking about, the lines of the segno, they are not just meant to, okay, I'm grabbing, I'm punching right here. I mean, Fiore is very explicit. He talked about using his fingers, his eyes, his thumb, his knuckles, his knee, to cause things on people in different forms and fashions. And I think that right there gives the understanding that there's more than just, there's more than just a fist. There's fingers. These things right here allow for different type of actions. Okay. I believe he's also nodding towards this, that there's more than just the edge of the dagger or the point. And that, again, in a heightened situation, in a real situation, which again, I'm hoping, again, not that people seek, you're going to come across people like that would try to do that, especially if you're a person of interest, a person that's in court, a lord, a baron, and someone wants to take your position, especially in those situations. And one thing that I've also taught here, was taught in the Marines, I was taught in other courses, is that when a bully goes in for something and they realize that that the person they were trying to bully on is winning, the thing that they do is they cheat. No fight is fair. No fight is fair. And understanding why these things may have been shaped the ways they are and so on and so forth may give context to greater considerations of Fiore's manuscripts and other medieval arms and martial art manuscripts. So with that being the case here, that's going to conclude everything I have here. Again, please leave a comment below on what you thought about this right here. Are you also one other person out there that has seen this practice of like, hey, use the pommel? The idea right here of utilizing the dagger in more than the capacity than just the dagger. Are you a person out there? Are you a believer of this? Are you a disbeliever? If you please critiques, thoughts, considerations, drop them in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts and whatnot. As always, if you've liked this content, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to hit the bell to be notified for when new content drops. And with that being the case here, everybody, please stay safe, train well, and fight on. I will see you all in the next video.